Welcome to the Good Old Fashion Masonic Podcast, where we talk all things Masonry while drinking an old fashioned. Right. I'm Brian.
And I'm Russ.
Russ, I'm not going to throw you off today.
Okay.
Because we have a huge, massive, legendary guest on today. And you know who it is. We'll announce that later.
Okay.
Here's your question. You know who we have on. Think about all that's been done. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. You know everything he's done in Kansas and then worldwide. Okay? Would you have ever taken that path? Yes or no, and why?
No. Because it's not me.
Well, let's say... I agree. Russ is not. He just...
Easy Betty.
He just likes to march to the beat of his own drum. Not that I don't, but that's not Russ's thing. What we're going to talk about it later in the time commitment. I would say no, for the obvious reason. We're not on anybody's list. But the big thing is, it's a major time commitment.
It is.
I mean, financial
Huge.
too, right? But it's a major time commitment.
Yes.
However, certain people that do that are just really born to do that.
Yes.
So, now that we've teased, who do we have on today?
Who do we have? We have Most Worshipful Jeff Sowder.
All right, so we've known Most Worshipful for a long time. He's a larger-than-life personality. You will always know when he's in the building. And I know...
I'm not even sure that once he's here, we're going to have room for you on camera.
Fair. But I'm going to promise you this. We're going to have to check him because he's going to try to take over this podcast. He's going to. So we when you see us reeling him in, that's what we're doing. So let's grab Jeff and let's grab a cocktail.
All right.
Welcome back. We have, I don't even know where to start on the title, so I'm just going to kind of work on all the way up. We've got Worshipful, Rite Worshipful, Most Worshipful, illustrious Imperial Sir Jeff Sowder. Welcome.
Thank you. And Jeff's just plenty good with everybody else.
We're going to go with that because there's only so much data left on my phone, just storage. So if I keep doing that, that's minutes. So you've done a lot in Masonry. And what we want to know first, we want to know more about the man, and then we'll get into Masonry. So we're going to break this, for everyone who knows, we're going to break this into two parts. This first part is all about Jeff's Blue Lodge journey up to the Grand Lodge. And then we'll kind of come back to the other. So, but before that, we want to know more about who is Jeff Sowder, the man?
Well, I was born and raised in Toronto, Kansas. My school consolidated in Toronto with Eureka High School when I graduated from the 8th grade. So I graduated from Eureka High School there, and that's where I met my wife. First day in school, laid eyes on her. Took her a while to come around a little bit. I had to buy a really nice car when I was about a junior, senior in high school, and I finally got her attention enough. And then after high school, I went to Imperial State University and then came home, worked family business, and Cheryl and I got married, and we just celebrated 48 years of wedded bliss.
Wow.
Years. Wow.
Very nice.
Most days.
Kids?
Well, kids?
I have 2 children, 2 daughters. Stephanie, who's a high school principal in Hamilton High School and grade school, and she's married to Jamie Nelson, and they have 3 kids, Corinne, Sutton, and Reed. And then our youngest daughter's Lindsay Hill. She lives in Fort Scott. She's coached college volleyball for years and years. She's married to John Hill, who's a baseball coach at Fort Scott Community College, and they have 2 boys, JJ and Hudson.
So your son-in-laws may not ever listen to this, so you can just tell us the truth. Do you like them?
I like them both. My girls chose well.
Well, good.
Yeah.
Is there a favorite? But you don't have to answer it, but you can say yes or no.
No, and I thank God I don't have to choose with you two because I would have put you both on the X list. No favorite. So,
Pretty much everybody does.
Yeah,
that is
right.
true. That
I'm
is true.
fortunate I've got 2 two great son-in-laws.
That's awesome.
Well, good. Well, so we know a little bit about the man, so now let's talk a little bit about the Mason. So from sort of the beginnings to when you're in the Grand East in the state of Kansas.
Well, Toronto's not a real big town. When I was a kid growing up, it was about 450, but we'd always had a very active Masonic lodge in Toronto. And when I was 19 years old, the bylaws of Kansas became changed from 21 to 18 years that you could join the Masonic lodge. And my dad was a past master of the lodge there in Toronto, and but another person, Larry Hibbard, came to the feed store one day where I was working for my dad and just kind of slid a piece of paper over in front of me and said, "Here, you always knew you were going to be a Mason. You might as well get this filled out. Let's get this started." So I filled that out and went through the 3 degrees, boom, 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 and the 3rd degree was right after the first of the year. Okay. And so they had conveniently left the junior steward's chair open at elections in December. And so they just slid me right into the junior steward's chair. Okay. And so I'm a brand new Master Mason. I'm now the junior steward. And I just progressed through every chair, senior steward, both deacons, junior warden, senior warden. And I was master of the lodge the first time, I think, in 1983.
Okay.
All right.
And I'd have been about 6 years old.
So, master of the lodge moving forward.
Well, first I always want to tell you how fortunate I was to be in Woodson Lodge 121. I can remember as an entered apprentice and, when they bring you to light the first time, all the other men standing there around the altar. Mm-hmm. Men that I'd known in our community to be stalwart people in that community, men that I'd admired, business people, farmers, ranchers, etc. And so I was fortunate enough that I came into a very active, very good Masonic lodge, and my experience was really good. So I became master of the lodge, and then a couple years later, we had one of our officers pass away, and so I got stuck back, and I became master of the lodge second time. And then right after that, I got appointed district deputy. And as you guys both know, in a lot of districts, especially back then, the district deputy thing was on a rotational basis. And so it just kind of happened. It was Toronto's turn, and I'd been master twice, and so I get chosen to be the district deputy. And most worshipful Larry Weingartner made that appointment, and I'm sure Larry Weingartner didn't have any idea who Jeff Sowder was, because that's kind of the way it works.
Sure.
But I did my job as area deputy, and then a year or so later, I was asked to be a Grand Lodge officer for Most Worshipful Cliff Canals. And he said, "I want you to be my Grand Junior Deacon," which was just a one and off deal. I've been in a lot of one and off things that ended up somewhere else. Mm-hmm. So I talked it over with Cheryl and talked it over with my dad, and I told Most Worshipful Cliff that I would become his Grand Junior Deacon. And that was my first real exposure with the Grand Lodge people. And so then after that, I became area deputy for 2 years for Don Robinette. And then following that, I was asked to be in a one and off appointed grand officer a couple other times. And then one of my good friends, who I'd met during Most Worshipful Cliff's year, Most Worshipful Bill Brown from Clearwater. Okay. Bill had been asked to be the Grand Senior Deacon. And then would eventually become Grand Master. And once Bill became the Grand Senior Deacon and then the Grand Junior Warden, Bill called me one day and says, "You and I need to talk." And I said, "Okay." He says, "When I get to the Grand East, I want you to be my Grand Senior Deacon." And I said, "Bill, man, I'm young. I've got kids. You need to think about this." And I said, "I don't know what I can do this. I need to talk to my wife." And he says, "You get your ducks in a row." Because he says, "I want you to be my Grand Senior Deacon appointment."
Well, he gave you a 4-year notice.
He did give me
That's
a 4-year
pretty
notice.
good.
Yeah. And so I just kind of treaded water a little bit, and I kind of looked around my lodge, and I thought, if I'm going to be Grand Master in 1997, I need to get busy because I might be the only guy left in my lodge because a lot of the guys were a little older than me. So I created the first Masonic prospect night ever in Kansas. And I did that off Most Worshipful Cliff Canals. It used to be everybody said you couldn't ask anybody to be a Mason. But Most Worshipful Cliff instituted selective invitation, where if you know a good man, you think he'd be a good Mason, you can ask him about becoming a Mason.
Genius.
Yeah.
Genius.
Off the charts, genius, Cliff. And so in 1991, I did a prospect night in Toronto, Kansas. And lo and behold, who shows up? But Bill Brown and Morris Fisher, two guys that were going to become Grandmaster because they knew I was having this prospect night. Mm-hmm. And so we did that in Toronto.
Were they for or against
it? They were all for it.
Okay. I was wondering what the rationale, why were they there? To see what you were really up to as a proponent or an opponent?
No, they were for it.
Okay.
But nobody had ever done one. And I actually did it with poster boards and had my things all wrote out. And I did it like a 4-H talk, where you slide the poster boards in and out.
Yep.
And we had, I think, 13 prospects there that night in Toronto, Kansas. And we got 9 of those guys to become Masons.
Wow.
The following year, we turned around and did it again. And we got 7 more guys to become Masons. And so we took in 16 new members in a 2-year period there. And so then Dick Overton became Grandmaster, and he asked me if I would go around the state and tell everybody how we did Masonic Prospect Nights. And that kind of got me, so to speak, I guess, on the map at a statewide level because I was at almost every area meeting that they had.
Were you an official membership chairman then?
I was.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense.
So that's kind of got me started, and then Bill became Grandmaster in 1993, and I became his Grand Senior Deacon. And then I moved my way through the Grand Lodge to where I became Grandmaster in 1997.
Okay. Wow. So let me just tell you something about Jeff. And I know this to be a fact. And just watch his face as I say this, because you're going to see that he's going to try to deny this. But if he ever gets an idea of what your notes are, and you're going to speak after him, he will take your lines. And let me just tell you, he's took about 4 of ours right now. So that just means I expected that to happen. So some of them that we've got some cue cards in the background that you can't see. So I've got some at the ready because I expected him to do that. So I'm gonna hold that. I just fired a warning shot. So now I know how old you were when you joined, and I know how old you were when you were a master, right?
Correct.
I'm going to ask you this. When you were master the first time in 81,
yep.
Do you remember who all of your line officers were?
Probably not.
So, I thought that might be the case. Do you know which one of your line officers the first time you were around went on to do something else, bigger, better? Was it a pretty quiet line?
It was a pretty quiet line. We're a long ways from anywhere.
You are.
And so we pretty much worked Blue Lodge Masonry, and we did it in our district. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And at that time, we had Yates Center, Leroy, Madison, Hamilton had a Masonic Lodge at that time, Eureka. And we did a lot of things just in the district. Mm-hmm. We visited lodges a lot. We helped with degree work a lot and things like that. And so we didn't ever get out of that.
Okay.
Very often. So,
okay.
Yep. We're not like Wichita where you guys do lots of great things and then you guys get spotted and get moved up in a hurry like both of you guys did. So,
yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, district deputy, area deputy, which position did you like the most?
Well, they're quite different. So, district deputy, obviously, you're just in like 7 or 8 Masonic lodges and they're all in your district and you know everybody there. You've been around these guys for years, and you go in and you develop. You give the Grandmaster's message. As area deputy, I had about 40 Masonic lodges under me, and I had 5 or 6 district deputies that I was responsible for. Right. And it was their job to go to the lodges and to give that message. And I was just to help them prepare and make sure they did their job and make sure they visited all their lodges. I'm more like an overseer as the area deputy Grandmaster.
You are a director.
That's right. And so I enjoyed district deputy probably more because you actually get up in front of people and talk.
Me too. I liked it. I liked district deputy.
As area deputy, you're a little more in the background, which there's nothing wrong with that. Yeah. But you dealt with people, a few number of people to make sure they were on track with what they did. Yeah. I'm going to tell you a great story. One of my district deputies, when I was area deputy, was a brother out of Emporia. And I'm not going to tell you his name because it doesn't matter, and he's deceased a long time ago. But during this year of this one Grand Master, he had the 3 R's, which is recruitment, restoration, and retention. Mm-hmm. And when this district deputy went and made these visits, and I would go to a lot of their visits just to sit in the background and see how they did and make sure they give the right talk. On any given night, he might get 1 or 2 of the R's right, and never get the second one or the third one right. It became quite comical. Right. So then I'd get to
reading, writing, arithmetic.
Yeah, there you go. And so then they'd always ask me, since I was there, do you have anything further to say? And then I kind of have to pick up the pieces in a nice way, not pointing out what he missed.
Right.
Just point out, we got a great retention thing going this year, and even though he failed to mention that, that was kind of the funny part of this deal. And so then, as you guys know, as district deputy, you're kind of responsible sometimes for helping finding your replacement.
You are
as well. So
if you ever want to come out.
That's right. Yeah. So as I was going into my second year as area deputy, this same brother, he didn't get me an appointment to take his place forever. And I'd call him. And he'd say, oh, no, I don't think I know yet. And so finally he calls me one night and he goes, he said, I'm just having such a good time with this. I think I'm just going to do it again.
Oh, no.
So I call up the deputy Grand Master, who was Don Romanette at the time, getting ready to be Grand Master. I said, Don, look, you got a choice to make. You're either going to have to find a new area deputy, or you're going to have to let me find a new district deputy in this one district, because I don't think I can go through another year with this guy. And he goes, you go find one because you're staying.
You're staying.
He's going.
Right, yeah.
And so it all worked out good and everything. It was funny. But that was a funny year with that one district deputy.
That's funny. So I'm going to kind of a 2-part question. If your lodge asked you to set in the East again, would you do it? And what's the overall health of Woodson Lodge number 121?
Well, like a lot of lodges, there's been some ups and downs.
Yes.
We've continued to be a pretty good lodge, but we kind of did a little dip over the last 6 or 8 years. But my son-in-law, Jamie Nelson, has been master of the lodge now for the last 2 or 3 years. And he has done a great job over the last couple of years of getting new people in. And we've taken in 7 or 8 new Master Masons last year.
Wow.
And started right before COVID. And then, of course, we kind of got shut down and we finished after COVID. And each and every one of these are from 18 to 25 years old.
Cheers to Woodson.
Cheers to that. Yeah, absolutely. Good job, Jamie.
No kidding.
And so
I was wondering why this was tasting so bitter.
Let's just leave that alone. And so I will tell you, Woodson Lodge is having a revitalization right now, and they're really doing well.
Wow. Don't you think Masonic lodges go through that?
Absolutely.
The ebbs and flows. Every one.
Yeah.
And look, you got to think about Woodson Lodge 121 in Toronto. We're now a town of 275 people. We've got a lodge 20 miles west of us in Eureka. Mm-hmm. We've got a lodge 15 miles east of us in Yates Center. We've got a lodge in Fredonia, 20 miles south of us. There's a lodge in Madison and Gridley, which are each 15, 20 miles north of us.
Right.
Your trade territory, so to speak, is pretty small.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's that way with a lot of lodges, a lot of rural lodges.
Yeah.
But you're right. And let me tell you the great thing about the guys we've just brought in is most of them are legacy Masons. Their fathers or grandfathers.
That makes
Masons.
a difference.
And now these guys are 18 to 23, 4 years old.
Yeah.
And almost always it wasn't the father that asked him to come in. It was granddad or one of us that said, your granddad would be really proud of you if you thought would join the lodge. And we've really got a great group of young Masons in Toronto.
I think, since you said that, I'm just speaking for my time in, but go 20 years before that, I don't think as Masons, we kind of go back to the kind of selective invitations. We missed a lot of opportunities, didn't we?
We did.
It's just...
we missed a generation full of them.
Well, the Vietnam for sure, but I feel like we might be doing it again in some weird way. Masonry is not for everyone. Every man should not be a Mason. I am not.
I agree with that.
I don't believe in that at all. However, I feel like if you see somebody say, that's a pretty good man, good people surround themselves with good people.
Yes.
So I can't figure out why we're not. I'm going to use this term because there's not another one comes, but why we're not being a little more aggressive?
I agree with that.
Right.
And don't you guys both agree that some men are great, really good men that would be really good for the lodge to have them as members.
Yeah.
But then there's other men that are really good men, but the lodge would really be good for them to help them further themselves. They can work both ways.
Very much so. And I think sometimes we sort of miss that point.
I agree with
that you find a good man, but yet I think what Masonry has will just enlighten him even more. And we sort of miss that.
Well,
we're sort of looking for ourselves sometimes.
We are. You know, our mantra, make good men better. Russ and I have talked about this before. I haven't had a boss for years and years and years. This is just, you know.
Heidi, Heidi,
I'm
did
sorry.
you hear that?
Yes.
Yeah.
Not one that writes a check to me, right? So, but what managing the lodge did for me, managing volunteers, as we know, is a totally different thing. If you've got an employee or staff member not doing something, that's a real quick resolution. Well, volunteers have their bags packed, ready to go on one thing. So, for me, really to your point, managing a lodge has made me a better manager of my people, my staff.
I would agree.
In fact, it's going to sound funny maybe to you two, but it's given me a lot more patience in areas where I never thought that I would or should have.
You are more tolerant.
I am much more tolerant. And it's a combination of age and leading. But I do think that you what's interesting, you mentioned members of lodge, not leaders of lodges.
Right.
And, you know, you need people behind the scenes way more than you need people up front. So I think, to your point, it's 100% right.
And I know we don't want to get into this, but you mentioned managing volunteers is much different than managing workforce.
100%.
And I taught that class at the Imperial Shrine level for 10, 15 years about how you work with volunteers versus how you work with other people. So you're absolutely correct.
Huge difference.
Big difference.
Huge difference.
So in Kansas Masonry today, go back to when you were Grand Master. How has Masonry changed, if it has, within Kansas? What do you like? What do you don't like? What do you see since you were Grand Master in '97?
Well, this is going to create a few waves probably with the current leadership, and I don't particularly mean that, but I think we were much more aggressive with leadership, with membership back then than we are today. Mm-hmm. So one of the things I was very proud of was I was a part of the council of administration that approved the first one-day class in Kansas. Most Worshipful Bill Brown was Grand Master. The first one-day class was held in February of 1994 in Kansas City. Mm-hmm. And we caught a lot of flack for that. Oh my gosh. It was changing the bylaws of Masonry, which it really wasn't. I mean, the landmarks were being torn down, which it wasn't. And I will tell you that if you and I want to talk about one-day class versus going in the conventional method, 1 degree at a time, it's a lodge. I would say, Russ, you pick which side you want to be on. Mm-hmm. I'll take the other side, and we'll argue till the sun comes up tomorrow morning, and I'll win that argument.
Mm-hmm. Do you know how Russ came in?
I do know how Russ come in.
Do you know how I came in?
No.
I was a C2A guy.
There you go.
So I was a hybrid of the one day, right.
And so I'll go back to that, Brian.
Yeah.
I do believe that, in my opinion, the very best way that people can come in lots of times is through the Chance to Advance class. You take your first degree in your home lodge, and then you get the benefit of coming in with a group of men and finding that fellowship and bonding with tremendous ritualists when they do that in a Chance to Advance class, as it is in a one-day class. Yeah. So we approved the one-day class, and then I'm going to say for the next 10 years or so, there was a lot of one-day classes held, and with great success. And whether it's in Kansas, Pennsylvania, Ohio, or any of the other 15, 20 states that's had one-day classes since the mid-90s, I'll just say, and to today, the statistics are all the same. Whether they came in the conventional way in a Blue Lodge, or whether they came in through a Chance to Advance class, or whether they came into a one-day class, you have the same number of men that are, percentage-wise, that are still Masons after 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, and 20 years. You've got the same number of men that become ritualists and work in their lodges and become lodge officers percentage-wise. Mm-hmm. The stats are all the same. The only difference is you have many more of them because you had the one-day class ability for them to come in. Right. And a lot of times these are men that don't think they had the time to give to a lodge. Right. But once they get in and they see what we're really all about, right, they fall in love with what our fraternity is, just as you guys did. Right.
Or they thought they were going another direction. I was fine with the C2A because I just wanted to be a Shriner. I didn't care about everything else, but it comes back to the lodges. It's really up to the lodges. If it wasn't for Pike and said, I'm going to take this little cocky guy and do something with him, I would have went on the Shrine side, probably already been Potentate.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty dang egotistical on his part.
Come on, boys.
It comes out at times. It really does.
But it was up to the lodge. So the path that I thought that I wanted, our lodge did their job to bring me back in. Arguably, had we not had a one-day class, Russ may not have come in. Okay, but maybe he would have later. But the timing wouldn't have worked where he would have been master of Pike in 2004 when we needed him to be to save us financially from going defunct. So I'm with you. I can argue both sides of it. Give me one, and I don't know what the right answer is, but I can say this to everyone. What we're doing now needs to be tweaked.
Yes.
Whatever. I'm not going to say changed because change, people freak out over that word. So I'll dial in tweak. We need to find some sort of a hybrid version because a lot of the lodges just can't do quality degree work.
Yeah, that's absolutely true.
And I think some Masons get hung up on what their passion is within Masonry and don't really see that there are several layers of Masons that they may not be a ritualist. They may not love the history of Masonry. They may love, the social piece. They may love the financial piece of making sure that we do the right things at the right time. There's a lot of Masonry that doesn't have to do with ritual every second of the day. So you have got to have ritualists. We have got to keep that foundation, but we've got to tweak some of the things that we do.
And Russ, to your part of that, it's a proven fact that ritual only appeals to 8 to 10% of the Masons that become Masons. Right. And thank God we have those men.
Yes,
because
absolutely.
The ritual is so important to what we are and what and our history and everything with us. And one of the reasons I love having chance advanced classes and one-day classes is because our Grand Lodge, when we have those, they bring together the very best ritualists from around the state to do that.
It is a show.
And I will drive miles to watch some of these guys do their parts.
The few that we've had in the last several years, I go to all of them because, one, we do degree work. We've done hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of degrees, but you'd like to find that. And if you sit somewhere different in a lodge room without giving away too much, right, you hear the same thing, but it sounds different when you're because you're seeing the candidate at a different angle, or you're seeing the position at a different angle. So anyway, I digress, but I want to take your last question before we go to the most important question of the podcast. Jeff, one thing, because you did a lot of great things on the Grand Law as a Grand Master. What's the single one thing that you're most proud of that you got accomplished as Grand Master of Kansas?
So I'm going to tell you two things, and that's 1A and 1B.
I just said he's going to try to take over the damn podcast, boys, and he just did.
So the first one I'll be short and brief on.
Okay.
And that is I issued one edict while I was Grand Master. One.
Okay.
And that was the fact that you could open and conduct business in a lodge on the first, second, or third degree. As you guys remember, maybe not, you weren't in back then.
I don't,
Back then, you had to do, if you did a first degree, you had to go to refreshment out of the first degree, kick your candidate out, your new brother, you had to send him home, and then you had to open on the third degree, and then do all your business. And I always thought it was a bad thing that we tell these people how great they are and how much we want them as a member, and we bring them in for their first degree or their second degree, and immediately we take them out of the room and they don't get to see anything else.
I always thought that was a thing. We could just do business on it. Well, thanks for that, man. That was cool.
So that was my edict.
All right.
And then it became by law the next year.
Okay.
So,
Cool.
but
Did you know that?
No, I didn't know that happened.
That's cool.
Yeah.
All right. Okay.
So
It's very cool.
But the thing I'm most proud of is the fact that I was the Grand Master that opened relations with Prince Hall Masonry in Kansas.
I thought that's what you said to say. Yeah.
And as I was preparing in the fall of 1996 to become Grand Master, now I know you guys are going to find this hard to believe, but this was before email. So all of my letters and
You
everything.
remember before email?
Yeah. So all of my appointments went out by letter. Mm-hmm. And most Worshipful Forrest Haggard was Grand Master in about 74, 75. And he lived in the Kansas City area. And he'd been chairman of foreign relations, which is any other Masonic lodge, any other state, any other country.
Okay. All right.
And so I wrote him a letter asking if he'd continue to do that. And Forrest took my letter, and Forrest had handwriting that was 10 times worse than a doctor. But he just took my letter and wrote something. All I could make out was no and a scribbled signature. And I thought, what did I do to make Forrest mad at me and turn me down? So I picked up the phone and called him. And I said, Forrest, it appears to me you've told me no. I don't want to be. No, he says, I've done it long enough. He says, somebody else needs to take this over. It's just time for somebody else. I said, well, but Forrest, here's what I really want you. It's my understanding that you know a prominent Prince Hall Mason in the Kansas City area. Forrest was a pastor. Mm-hmm. And the one that I thought he knew, and I didn't know his name, but he was also a pastor in Kansas City of a church. And I said, my goal this year is to open up relations with Prince Hall Masonry in Kansas. And I need your help. He says, take that letter, throw it in the trash. I'm in. Just like that. Okay. And so when I became Grand Master, we'd already set some of these wheels in motion. Immediately, Forrest got myself and most worshipful Lemuel Wynn, who was a past Grand Master of Prince Hall Masonry. We got together and met one day. Mm-hmm. And I said, I want to have a meeting where all of my Grand Lodge officers there, invite all the Prince Hall Grand Lodge officers there in Kansas. And we will host that meeting middle of state somewhere. Just pick a time, date, and we'll make it work. So together we picked out Manhattan, Kansas. It was in June. And we invited the Prince Hall Masons to come through Lemuel Wynn. It was not a Blue Lodge meeting. We just had it in a hotel, in a ballroom area. Okay. And that was the day I met Most Worshipful Roy Althouse. Okay. And Most Worshipful Roy was Grand Master of Prince Hall, and we immediately became friends. It was just like made in heaven for this to happen. And so we met in June, and then we met again in the fall, and they hosted us. And in the meantime, Alan Hurlburt was my Grand Chaplain, later became Grand Master of Kansas, but he's a lawyer. Mm-hmm. And we agreed at that first meeting that I would have Alan write, and Roy and I had a bunch of ideas that we put down on a piece of paper, and what became known as the Prince Hall Compact. And Alan wrote the first draft of it, and then Roy and I tweaked it a little bit. We sent it back to Alan. Alan gets all the credit for this. I mean, we might have given him the notes, but he did a fantastic job with this. And when we had that second meeting, all the Grand Lodge officers on both sides signed it. So now let's fast forward to March of 98, my Grand Lodge session. And we brought that forward to the Masons of Kansas, and we approved that 100%. And then in June...
You guys should have sold framed...
We should have.
Compacts.
We should have. That would have been cool.
Is it too late to do? That would be cool. Yeah. Because is it coming up on an
25th anniversary this year? Yeah.
Why did we miss that, boys?
Yeah.
I have Dr. James Naismith's Masonic petition in my office.
Yeah.
And where did you get it?
I got that from the Grand Lodge. Okay. So yeah, see, we missed something.
Yeah.
So I think that was very cool for. Relations between the AF and AM and Prince Hall in Kansas. So that's a pretty good one. So
so let me just finish real quick.
Okay.
I know you're on a time budget. Cheryl and I then in June went to the first. We were the first AF and AM Masons in Kansas. I was, and Cheryl went to the Prince Hall Grand Lodge session in June that year, where they then ratified the Prince Hall Compact. That was an experience that I'll never forget. Awesome. It was phenomenal.
Yeah, that was you're ahead of your times, my friend.
Well, and to fast forward one more thing, so then immediately I put up that we could have dual memberships with Prince Hall.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that was ratified at the next Grand Lodge session, which was T. Michael Figgins of March of 99. And with the consent and the approval of Most Worshipful T. Michael Fagan, I had already petitioned for membership, unknown to Roy Althouse, petitioned him membership in Woodson Lodge 121, and it was approved. I then purchased him a perpetual life membership in Woodson Lodge 121. And so in March of 99, when our Grand Lodge ratified dual membership with the Prince Hall, Roy was in attendance, we immediately called him on stage, and I presented him with his perpetual life membership to Woodson Lodge 121, and he became the first Prince Hall Mason to do that. And in June, shortly thereafter, June, I became the first AF&M Mason to have a dual membership with Prince Hall, with Call Blue Lodge in Manhattan.
The more you know. I did not know that.
Yeah, it was
very
great.
Cool. Very cool. Well, after all that, so this is episode 1 of our 2-part with Jeff Sowder. So stay tuned for our next episode 2. But before we get there, the most important question of the podcast. Ooh. We do a little game called One Must Go. And anybody that knows Jeff, he's a beef guy. Beef and feed industry. Beef, it's what for dinner. I've heard the song that his grandsons do. I've heard it. It's all about the beef. I know what that's all about. So, Jeff, there's 4 things on the screen. You have chicken noodle soup. You have chicken fried chicken. You have chicken wings, whatever dip they're in. And a chicken sandwich from whatever your favorite chicken place is. One has to go forever like it was never invented. Jeff, which one is it and why?
Well, if my grandsons were here, they'd take the scoop shovel out of the barn and they'd scoop them all 4 up at once and throw them in somewhere they got. And so we get rid of all this range maggot stuff in one fell swoop. But if I had to make just one go.
One go forever like it was never invented.
Wings, out the door.
What?
Out the door. They're tiny, they're nothing, they're 2-bite crap. You have to dip them in something. You realize how much stuff you got to put on, over, around, or in chicken to make anybody want to eat it. It's just a foul food.
It's fair.
Yeah. So I'd get rid of the wings.
What would you get rid of, Russ? That's a tough one for me.
Probably the sandwich or wings, yeah. It's wing
see, you guys in the wings, I can't get on board. I'd probably get rid of the sandwich with all the bread. There's some other stuff. So, thanks for watching. Stay tuned next week for episode 2, where we're going to talk all things shrine with Jeff Sowder. Thank you.
Cheers.